Hey guys. This is part 17 and finale of What If Naruto Died and Became a Hollow. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 65, Amenaza. Resurrección, Segunda Etapa. At that moment, everything went to hell. The world practically exploded into orange as the storm of Ryatsu extended out from Naruto, bathing the world in the dull color of his Ryatsu. The plants started rustling as the Ryatsu overtook them, and it seemed the sky was bleeding orange with the color display that lit it up. The Namikaze family was breathing heavily from the sheer force of the Ryatsu, but oddly enough, both Minato and Kushina did not seem concerned with its power. Instead, their eyes were focused on something else, the carved stone monuments of the Hokages. This is Konoha? Kushina asked tentatively. The place was a wreck. The buildings were falling into serious disrepair, clearly uninhabitable. But what was more concerning is that there was no life to be found anywhere within the village. It was a desolate ghost town, and there weren't even birds nesting in whatever trees were still alive. Both Minato and Kushina knew that Naruto was the one who had destroyed Konoha, but they hadn't expected people to not move into the abandoned ruins. The ninja world seemed to have lost its way of ninja a long time ago, with Konoha's collapse unbalancing the power. Konoha? Akane asked, a shocked expression on her face. You mean this ruined place is your home village? The one that everyone came from? I know you said it was destroyed, but I guess I just didn't expect to be dumped out here in the real world. I'm not sure Naruto feels the same way. This place may be a hotbed for spiritual activity though, seeing as that's why Karakura Town was displayed not too long ago. Perhaps that's also why Konoha got displayed afterwards. We don't really have time to think about it. Oh look. Taiki's words seemed to jolt the remaining family members back to reality, and to the vortex of Ryatsu that was once Naruto. Like with his first release, Naruto stood within a storm of Ryatsu that may have reached out to the very ends of the village in its power. Like an egg, there was a shell of Ryatsu protecting a silhouette within it all, and even though the family couldn't see Naruto's features change within the cloud, they could feel his power grow even further. The torrent of Ryatsu did not linger as long this time. It was dispelled relatively quickly, leaving nothing but the stillness of the destroyed village. Plus the monstrous figure standing on the Hokage tower. Minato could only stare. Akane almost dropped her sword. The thing that stood there before them resembled the Arrancar from before in shape, but in this form, there was something so wrong about it. Naruto stood on the rooftop looking down upon them, but the first thing Minato wondered was if the Primera was actually able to view them in that state. After all, it was difficult to see without any eyes. The abomination leaped off of his perch, floating down to land upon the ground, and the family gawked when they saw the new Naruto for the first time. They didn't even know if they could call this a hollow anymore. Not everything was different from his first release. He was still vaguely vulpine-shaped, and was still covered from head to toe in armor. However, the hollow plating was a much deeper red, verging on almost black. His hollow mask was exactly the same as in his first release, from the teeth covering his upper lip, to the eyepiece that extended into fox-like ears. However, there were also plenty of key differences. There were many more spikes littering his body in addition to the two conductors on his shoulder that had apparently been regenerated once he entered his second release. A quick glance at his tails would show the pincer-like appendages to be coated with no less than dozen small spikes on each one, down to the very tips. Out of the back of his now completely black hands and claws protruded two more spikes out of each one, and the prickly weapons could be seen lining his arms all the way to his shoulders. The same white vortex was pulsating where his seal used to be, yet it seemed livelier as it crackled with white energy. His shoulder spikes were crackling with the same energy. The most striking thing about him would be his face, however. The parts that were uncovered by his mask was a sickly pale, clammy to the touch, and with the consistency of rotting flesh. His eyes were two empty-looking abyssal holes in his head, to which Minato wondered if they had melted away when he had transformed. When the 5th Division captain stared into them, it was like his life force was being sucked from him, and a deep fear overtook him. Those eyes weren't like hollow holes. He could not see through to the other side of the Aaronkar. Like a hideous infection, Naruto's eyes were endlessly oozing a strange liquid. It ran down his face in twin rivulets, streaming down his cheeks and dripping off his chin. From the looks of things, the rim of both his eyes were splattered with the liquid, creating a repulsive ring around the bottomless pits. It was almost like splattered blood left over when his eyes were ripped out. The hollow opened his mouth to let out a heavy sigh, and Minato realized in disgust that his eyes weren't the only things leaking that disgusting liquid. As soon as he opened his mouth, the viscous orange liquid burst from his mouth, dribbling off his chin with the other streams. When he looked at Naruto's enormous hollow hole, it too was leaking the liquid in a much thicker stream down his torso, where it seemed to mix with the vortex on his stomach. Minato's trained eyes picked up on the color of the thick liquid leaking from many areas of Naruto's body. It was orange. Wait, orange? If I recall correctly, orange is the color of Naruto's Ryatsu. Whenever he decides to release, it's always the same shade of orange as that liquid. Which means, as he stared into Naruto's eyes, he realized that what Naruto's eyes were leaking was pure Riryoku. And yet, that didn't make any sense. Riryoku was always in a plasma state, which was how it manifested when it left their bodies. Yet, Naruto's body was somehow exuding liquid Riryoku. He had changed the state of matter for pure Riryoku, which was an absurdity in and of itself. So, who wants me to take their soul first? Naruto asked, staring them down with the empty sockets that he called eyes. His voice gave Minato the chills. Naruto's normal voice was worked into what seemed to be several other voices all as one. Akane raised her sword, and Minato could tell she was feeling less confident than before. With that in mind, he decided to take action. Taiki, form the strongest barriers you can with your Bankai and protect all of us. Akane, form a special sword that can cut him from your own Bankai. Kushina, come with me and press the attack. We may be in a different setting, and he may have gotten stronger, but we haven't lost yet. This is not our son. We owe it to the real world to take down whatever this thing is. Minato barked, ordering his family into line. He was steadfast in his approach, and with Naruto's new appearance, he could definitively call the creature before him something far separate from family. Minato's orders seemed to break the rest of the family from their stunned stupor, and they swerved into action. Taiki surrounded himself with his two remaining pillars, and Akane conjured up a single blade which she tossed to Minato. The man himself was controlling his Bankai from afar, though he knew only physical attacks with a material blade were likely to work on Naruto. Naruto himself grinned, showing serrated orange teeth that had been stained with the liquid. His family was preparing to fight him, and looked like they were going to try and kill him for real. And yet, with the same strategy they had used before. His tails were bristling with excitement, and he looked at the pincer-like ends of them. Let's see how long the four of you can last. In this state, the longer you take, the lower your chances of survival. Naruto thought deviously, flashing out of existence with the rushing static sound of a sonido. He reappeared between the group, but did not attack. Kushina let a look of fear enter her face when her son fixated her with his empty eye sockets, and attacked out of desperation and despair. In front of Naruto, all her experience as a Shinigami and all of her training to become a captain meant nothing. She attacked with a reckless swing, intent on taking Naruto's head without a second thought, with no regard for restraint or defense. And of course, her blade was coated with both Taiki's gray barrier and her own blood shield. She was no longer aiming for Naruto's conductors, instead for just any wound. Faster than her blade could move, Naruto pivoted backwards to avoid the full brunt of Kushina's strike, before shifting forward to catch just the tip of the blade as it grazed him across the chest, creating a very small cut. More importantly, the gray barriers and the blood shield both channeled into Naruto's newly reformed conductors, leaving Kushina with just a blade for a couple seconds. The feeling gave both Naruto and the Namikaze family a sense of déjà vu. Minato noted with interest the fact that Naruto had perfectly shifted his body forward to catch just a slight cut from Kushina. The important thing for him was apparently contact with Kushina's Riryoku, and the ability to absorb it. Yet, in their previous battle, He had gone out of his way to avoid every single attack. Absorbing Ryatsu with his creation was just a fail-safe in case he got hit. The fight continued despite Minato's analysis, but Naruto seemed genuinely happy as the energy from Kushina's attack channeled into the conductors on his shoulders. Unlike his first form, where the spiral stayed the same, this time the energy glowed brighter as he absorbed the Riryoku. It was swirling faster now, and had turned into a bright shade of yellow. There was a strange hissing noise that lingered in the air, before Naruto's grin split even wider, showing his orange teeth. There was then a sound like a fire that had just been lit, and a blinding light. When the noise subsided, Naruto looked behind himself. Of his 9 spiked tails, the first one on the very left end was now lit with an orange Riryoku glow at the end of its tip. In my segunda etapa, I'm the master of all Riryoku. Naruto guffawed, pointing his right index claw at the 4 family members. Before they had any time to react, he fired. Primer Zero. The orange beam was fired from the tip of his claw. It was an ordinary Zero. It also managed to destroy 2 city blocks when he fired it in a straight path, engulfing all 4 family members in the blast. Ha! You like that? That's just the beginning. We'll see if you'll be able to make it to the end. Naruto taunted, the one lit tail twirling behind him. He sped away, charging orange Ryatsu into his hands. He reappeared before Minato, giving him a quick palm thrust before flashing away from the counter that his father would no doubt give him. Unfortunately for Minato, Taiki had protected all 4 of them from the previous Zero with a barrier, but through Naruto's palm thrust, Minato had made contact with Naruto, and the gray barrier had disappeared. Minato grunted, the wind knocked out of him. Even with the barrier, Naruto's physical attacks were nothing to scoff off, hence the reason they couldn't afford to have Taiki take down the barriers. Without those barriers, just one physical attack from Naruto would likely kill any one of them. Akane seemed to snap out of her stupor at this point, the mirror surrounding her now shining with an ethereal force. She and Minato locked eyes, and a mutual understanding seemed to fall over them both. Akane, he whispered in her ear as he stood next to her. Isn't there any way your Bankai's power can nullify the creation? He asked in a low tone. Akane looked thoughtful for a moment. Just because I'm in my Bankai doesn't mean I can wish for something and it will automatically come true. You know that. I'm pretty much limited to enhancing my own abilities. Commands that take away powers or have an effect on the surrounding atmosphere are off limits. This is truly an interesting conversation you all are having. Do you mind if I join in? What? Where did he come from? Akane barked, as she and her father reflexively moved back to put distance between themselves and Naruto. The Primera had somehow flashed right between them, without it even looking like he used Sonido. Give me a wakizashi that will kill him! Akane roared, as she skid back on her heels. That was truly pushing the limit of her Bankai's power, but the wakizashi she pulled from one of her mirrors seemed to indicate it was possible. It would kill him if struck. A command like that took a lot of Riryoku, as she could clearly tell from the amount of Ryatsu that was contained within the knife. Any less Ryatsu, and it would be unable to kill him. She hefted the small sword over her shoulder, throwing it with as much strength as she could muster, which by Shinigami standards was pretty damn fast. It was almost at point-blank range, but Naruto easily saw the attack coming. However, instead of dodging the attack, he charged up his Ryatsu to his maximum capacity the moment she threw it. The same liquid orange substance that leaked from his orifices surrounded him in a dome of pure power. When the wakizashi impacted it, it was instantaneously dissolved, from the metal blade down to the hilt. Unfortunately, I still cannot draw a Riryoku from physical objects, but who's to say I can't melt down their physical containers and take the leftover energy? The Ryatsu torrent that was Naruto spoke. The orange dome of energy overtook the leftover red Riryoku that remained from Akane's wakizashi, adding the energy to itself. After that was finished, Naruto dropped his Ryatsu to a more sustainable level, but the vortex on his stomach was now a much duller yellow. 2 more tails had been lit up with the same orange glow on their tips, giving him a total of 3 activated tails. Damn it, Akane! Look at what you did! His Ryatsu's even stronger now! Taiki called out, forming another layered barrier around each of his family members once he knew the magnitude of Naruto's Ryatsu. What he didn't expect was for Naruto to come after him directly after, slashing one of his remaining pillars into a dozen slices with his Ryatsu-laden claws. Taiki couldn't afford to lose his last pillar, or else his Bankai would be completely void in the face of Naruto. He focused his gray Riryoku into a barrier, surrounding both himself and the last pillar in his signature barrier. "Stop it, Taiki! That barrier's just asking to be absorbed!" Minato yelled at his son, rushing into action. Kushina took a position right next to Akane, who regarded her mother with a solemn smile. "Honey, you produced a wakizashi that you claimed would without a doubt kill him, right? Can you do something like that on a bigger scale? We need to come up with a plan." "Well, that last wakizashi uses up a lot of Riryoku to make it work. To answer your question, I can do something like that on a larger scale with my remaining power. I can basically make 3 giant blades extend from the mirrors with the full command to kill. But these blades are large, to contain the amount of Ryatsu within them. I can't fire them off right now, as we'll all get caught in the crossfire, including myself. I need to set up crystal mirrors at specific points to accommodate the size of these blades, and after I use my attack, all of my Riryoku will be drained. It's doubtful that Naruto's just going to let you set up this attack," Kushina muttered, watching Minato try to deliver a strike with his sword to Naruto in an attempt to distract him from Taiki. "If I can get you and Dad to keep him busy while I put the mirrors in their right positions, I should be able to pull this off." "Ha! Like a mother would need any more motivation to give a future to her children. If this is our best chance, then I would gladly put my body on the line for it." Akane gave a tearful nod at her mother, before she used Shunpa to move away from battlefield, her mirrors following her. Kushina breathed a sigh of relief. Naruto hadn't noticed her leave yet. Meanwhile, Naruto's claws were pitted against Minato's blade, while Taiki just stood within his Bankai conjuring more barriers for whenever Minato would lose them to Naruto's creation. Naruto blocked a thrust with his forearm spikes, losing a couple of them in the process. Minato was taking a page out of Kushina's book earlier, going directly for his conductors. "Hey, Dad," the abomination known as Naruto spoke in his several voices. It still made Minato shudder. "Don't you think you ought to try a new fighting style? I've absorbed several of those barriers already, and you can probably tell by now that it may be too late," Naruto mockingly advised. "I don't have much of a choice now, do I? Without those barriers, you would have destroyed my sword and killed me by now with one of your palm thrusts," Minato snarled. Naruto laughed. "I guess it's true, you need an entire barrier over you at all times if you want to fight me. But shouldn't you know by now that if it gets too far you're gonna die? I'm not saying this because I want to kill you, I'm stating an objective fact." He paused for just a second. "You can feel it, can't you? I'm stronger than when you first fought me. Not just when I was in my first release, but even from the time I just had gone into my resurrection, segunda etapa. That's what my enhanced creation does in this state. It awakens my tails, and with each subsequent one, I become stronger. By the time my 9th and final tail is awakened, I become what is known as El Hueco Perfecto, and what that means." Naruto paused. "Is all 4 of you are dead?" Naruto broke contact with Minato. "It seems hopeless, doesn't it? The way you're fighting me only takes away what little time you have left. You keep providing me Riryoku for my powered-up form, all the while trying to protect this liability over here." Naruto cackled. That did it. A mid-level had a spell went bursting at Naruto, who absorbed it easily while still grinning at his father. Minato looked surprised at his son, who was wearing a look of anger and disdain. There was a burst of light, and Naruto's 4th tail lit up orange as his vortex turned the same shade. Taiki was standing outside of his Bankai, leaving himself fully unprotected in case Naruto decided to strike. "What are you doing, Taiki? You can't just fire Kida at him. That's a pointless waste that will only make stronger," Minato shouted at his son, who pointedly ignored him. I am not a liability," Taiki punctuated, and to top it all off, he released what remained of his Bankai, the giant iron pillar reforming into his Shurikai. The gray barriers that were surrounding the family disappeared. And with his shuriken reformed, Taiki swung it down upon Naruto. "Stop it, Taiki! Can't you see he's just trying to goad you?" Minato cried, but he was pushed back by the strong reiatsu that both combatants were emitting. The second Namikaze son didn't seem to care how his brother was now a liquid Riryoku leaking monstrosity. The force he attacked him with was enough to create a crater wide enough to swallow several ruined buildings. Naruto didn't even flinch, even when blood ran down from his forehead into his empty eye sockets. Without saying a word, he disappeared with a quick sonito, appearing behind Taiki. The youngest Namikaze held his club across his shoulder, careful not to use any kita that Naruto could absorb. Naruto's claws impacted with the iron of his club, but Taiki pushed out enough reiatsu to prevent the Iron-Car was piercing directly through it. Too late. Naruto's right conductor was being charged with energy, and Taiki's eyes were drawn to the vortex in his stomach. The symbol was glowing brighter, and the four activated tails of Naruto had small wisps of Riryoku rising from the tips, flowing like a stream into the sky. Quarto Zero. Naruto's Riryoku was hissing again, and the power of his newest Zero obliterated 4 city blocks, throwing the remains in the air as if they were nothing more than refuse. And Taiki was caught up in the middle of it. "Taiki!" Minato couldn't rush to his son's aid immediately, seeing as the Zero had such a large width that Minato himself was almost engulfed in it all, despite being relatively safe over to the side. That entire thing still was nothing more than a normal Zero. The ray of light subsided, showing the destruction it had left in its wake. Taiki flopped out into the open, charred and black as he coughed up smoke. He stood his ground, looking defiant despite his body's condition. That decision cost him dearly. Trying to fight me with just your shuriken is a decision that will cost you your life. Naruto howled. He thrust his right claw out, palms upward and fingers curled as if he were clutching a baseball. "No, wait!" Minato cried, but he couldn't react in time. The instance where Naruto held his hand up and the deadly Riryoku attack rose from the ground happened in barely a second. It was too quick for anyone to do anything, even for Taiki to do something as simple as moving. Rija. There was no other prerequisite to Naruto's attack, and Taiki could never expect the thin, laser-like lines of Riryoku to materialize in almost every direction. They emerged from both the air and the ground as they extended vertically and horizontally in every direction, making escape virtually impossible for the general area. Taiki roared in anger as he was first impaled through by one of the thin beams. He dropped his shuriken, hearing it clatter to the ground beyond an entanglement of beams. After that, he felt several more beams put more holes in his body, and he knew that if he didn't get out, he was going to turn into a honeycomb quickly. He looked up weakly, seeing the impossibility of escape. The attack pattern was set up like a grid, beams in all directions with only thin gaps that he was unable to slip through. Naruto grinned a stained smile as he retracted his hand, and the grid-like array of beams disappeared, but not without leaving no less than a dozen holes in Taiki's body. The entire spectacle had only taken a few seconds, which explained how Minato only got there to help his son after the damage had already been done. Taiki collapsed into the village dirt, desperately reaching for his shuriken, but to no avail. Naruto watched the scene with a small smile. He had hit Taiki in several internal organs. "Don't bother. I hit both of his lungs with that attack. Even if I hadn't hit him there, he's filled with more than enough holes to make it fatal. That liability is gonna die." Minato ignored Naruto, kneeling at his son's side. Blood had already collected into a generous puddle from the collective impact of all the holes he had in him. "Dad, please, just stop him," Taiki croaked, before his head flopped lifelessly forward. There was no big speech, no final touching scene between father and son, and few words exchanged. Namikaze Taiki died. It was as simple as that. "Ragrik!" Naruto roared, using the opening creating in Taiki's death to attack his emotionally distraught father. Minato didn't say a word, as if he weren't even giving Naruto the satisfaction. However, he kicked his sword to his other hand, before slinging it over his shoulder to block the claw strike from Naruto before spinning around while countering. When Naruto looked at his father's face, it was even stonier than normal, But the main difference was that Minato was not even saying a single word to him now. He didn't even show anger over his son's death, even though Naruto could register the turmoil that lay within. It was taking all he had to hold back the mercilessly strong Arrancar. The sword that Akane gave him didn't exactly give him any new defensive abilities. The only thing it could do is cut. "Hey, Dad. I have a secret. You want to know what it is, don't ya? Don't ya? Don't ya?" Naruto roared, laughing at his own stupid jokes. Minato, of course, did not respond. Instead, he opted to go for a slash at Naruto's right conductor, and to his surprise, Naruto let him. He really should have been more wary when he saw Naruto's eyeless face split into a disturbing large, oozing grin. After that, he laughed, flinging orange Riryoku spittle right into Minato's face. That premonition came true when he saw Riryoku being pulled from the blade that Minato was using. Like always, it was being channeled into Naruto's body. "You really should have waited for my explanation. When I hit Four Tails, I have enough strength to begin drawing Riryoku from my opponent's weapons, though only if you touch my conductors with them." Minato waved the sword Akane gave him in front of his face, feeling out the weightlessness that came from a Ryatsule's sword. This thing was near useless now, even if it was imbued with the power to cut Naruto. He cast it aside, mulling his options as Naruto gave him a lazy look. Where the hell were Kushina and Akane? He could sense their Ryatsu moving around various spots in the village. Were they planning something? He still had his Bankai out and hovering over to the side, but both his Shurikai and Bankai could be readily absorbed by Naruto's creation. He could absorb Riryoku in the open air if it so much as touched his body, and from objects like weapons if it touched his conductors. Kido was useless, his Zanpakuto was useless, and Hakuto would just be a waste of time. Naruto was literally impossible to fight at the moment. If he could find Akane. He wasn't running away, he was making a tactical retreat. It wasn't like running away permanently was possible. He had to find Kushina and Akane and regroup. Without Taiki though, their chance of victory just lowered significantly. Naruto was slowly moving toward him, but Minato was one step ahead, disappearing with his fastest Shuinpa. Naruto made an annoyed sound, his multiple voices making it sound like a cross between a hiss and a growl. Minato could outlast him for so long with that head start. He knew that his Sonito was faster. He disappeared, giving chase to the man who was heading in the direction of the female Namikaze's family members. Naruto seemed to notice this, and the fact caused the temperamental Arrancar's mood to uplift again. The two of them surged through the south block of the village to the ruined main gates, where Kushina and Akane were setting up their master plan, unbeknownst to Naruto. Both girls were surprised when Minato appeared before them in a flash of Shunpa, looking battered, and wearing the stony expression that had not left his face ever since Taiki drew his last breath. "Minato! Where were you all this time? We thought you were. Taiki is dead." Kushina's breath was caught hitched in her throat, and she made a pathetic murmuring noise as the sentence died on her lips. Akane too looked shocked, but when she couldn't feel his Ryatsu anymore, she had no reason to doubt her father. "And no," Taiki's twin said. The normally aloof and short-tempered Akane almost fell to her knees, and would have if her father didn't catch her before she fell. "I know how upset you both must be, but we can mourn him later. Once we defeat Naruto, we can cry ourselves to exhaustion. But for now, Naruto is still out there," Minato said, drying his daughter's eyes as a single tear fell out of each one. "I understand, but Mom and myself have been setting up what may be the best chance to defeat him," the normally spunky Akane said, in a much more reserved and sullen tone. Minato had noticed that there was only one red crystal mirror hovering around Akane's body, but it wasn't until that moment that he chose to comment on it. "Akane, where is the rest of your Bankai?" Akane smiled weakly. "While you were keeping Naruto busy, both of us were moving throughout the area to set up our trap. My other two mirrors are set up at adjacent positions throughout the village. If I put all my power into it, I should be able to create 3 necessarily large blades that if successful will undoubtedly kill him. In its own way, you and Taiki have managed to distract him long enough for me to set it up. The problem now is getting Naruto in the correct position." By triangulating the exact area, the point where the blades will meet is the exact center of the village, directly where we first met. The bad timing is that Naruto will surely follow us out here. We have to force him back into the center of the village. Once in the right spot, I can activate my trap. Once they were done talking, the figure of Naruto appeared via Sonido about 20 feet ahead of him, staring them down intently. "Found you," he sang. The more tails he had activated, the stronger he gets. He is at 4 tails right now, and has gained the power to sap Riryoku from her swords should they touch his conductors, Minato said, briefing both his wife and daughter. "Force him to the center of the village, even if you have to make him stronger. Just move him there. This is our final shot," she said. "Give me 3 swords that will cut him and his attacks," she ordered, as 3 identical blades appeared from her final mirror, before she left it in its designated spot. "This is all I can do. I will need all my remaining Riryoku to issue a command of this magnitude. Make sure you don't lose these," she said, handing a sword to each of her parents. "Kushina, keep your blood barrier up at all times. Your Tenbatsu may be useful in this situation, if it forces him to move," Minato said. "You don't have to tell me twice. Tenbatsu." Minato and Akane looked surprised as Kushina summoned the giant tidal wave of blood, which she then hurled at Naruto. The premier grinned, but Minato was delighted to note that the wave was so strong that he instinctively moved back a city block, even if the attack was harmless. The Tenbatsu lapped at his feet, and the eyeless Arankar grinned as his body went to work absorbing the bloody attack. There was another crash, and the abomination's 5th tail lit up orange. His body was getting bulkier, and Minato noticed the subtle increase in spikes as he absorbed more power. Not to mention, even those metal-looking spikes were dripping with liquid Riryoku now, the same substance that was dribbling out from his eyes and mouth. Quinto Siro. The same normal Siro that Naruto fired from the tip of his claw burst forth, screeching with power and carving up a trench in the old dirt streets of the village. "Allow me." Minato stepped forward after uttering those words, trusting in the power of Akane's special swords. With precision only a captain could achieve, he cut the Siro into 4 separate parts in a flash, breathing heavily as they passed harmlessly over his family, and destroyed the old village gates behind them. Naruto's grin widened. "Siro Aguja." While still bursting forward after being cut, small needles of orange Riryoku burst from the main body of the Siro like raindrops, falling in every which way against the family. All 3 of them whipped their swords around at every which angle, blocking needles upon reflex. Minato took a couple of them in the knee, noting with great interest on how they resembled Samban, though the effectiveness of them was much increased, and he couldn't pull them out. Kushina took the lead from that point, her blood shield allowing her to nullify every Aguja while Akane and Minato languished while trying to avoid them. She sped towards Naruto, thrusting forth with a quick flurry of jabs. Naruto recognized the special sword and how she was not going for his conductors. He backpedaled closer and closer to the center of the village, leaping over a ruined stall as Kushina slashed her sword strong enough to create a razor wind that sliced into the dirt road. "He's getting closer. We just need a little more to get him directly in the middle," Akane whispered to her father. Minato scratched his chin. His Bankai had been following him around, but until now, he hadn't dared to use it. "I have an attack that will push him back farther, but it won't be able to harm him. In fact, I can't really use this as much more than a distraction. I need you to go help your mother and try to push him back while he's trying to absorb it," Minato said, climbing onto his Bankai cloud. Akane took off, speeding into the battlefield after her mother, who was back to fighting with her sword instead of the blood that accompanied her Bankai. Her Tenbatsu had subsided, meaning it was now safe to enter the vicinity. Minato lagged behind, far enough out of range to where Naruto wouldn't focus on him, but close enough to launch his attack. Naruto growled when he noticed Akane enter the field, after dodging a flurry of strikes from Kushina. While she was reeling and focusing on her next attack, he grasped his hands together as if he were holding a baseball, swinging his arms out and letting out a stream of Ryatsu. The wave of concentrated Riryoku was really nothing more than a feeble attempt at an attack, and both Akane and Kushina sidestepped it fairly easily. Naruto backflipped over the pincer attack wrought by the two women, and the ruined central plaza with the Hokage Tower behind it was less than a city block away. Kushina and Akane locked blades, frowning slightly when they realized that they missed their target. They were giving Naruto the silent treatment just like Minato, clearly in memoriam for the fallen Taiki. No one was giving him the satisfaction, but Naruto didn't even seem to care. However, Naruto began to get suspicious when he saw that Akane and Kushina were backing off for just a moment. They stepped away, standing about 10 feet away from each other. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he saw his father standing by the ruined village gates on his Bankai cloud. He could feel the strength of his Ryatsu rise, and a split second later the man fired an intense bolt of Arai straight at him. Naruto dodged on instinct, forgetting that his creation would render the attack useless. He moved back and to the left, but did not expect another beam to rocket forth down the road to Akane's right, identical to the first blast. He was absorbing the blast with his creation, but the combination of instinct and the force from the attack was moving Naruto back further and further. As he moved closer to the center of the village, he was hit by another blast which was on the opposite side of the original, his conductors absorbing the Riryoku without fail. As he stepped on the Leaf Village's symbol in the center of the village, his sixth and seventh tails lit up orange, and the vortex on his stomach turned a deep red. Akane's heart nearly burst out of her chest as she saw Naruto step foot on the designated point. He was smiling his abominable smile at all of them as his eyeless gaze peered into their soul, but he wasn't moving. Minato flashed into existence right beside both women, and all three family members nodded to each other, stepping into view of Naruto. Well, looks like the man of the house finally decided to stop hiding. Tell me, what the fuck do you plan to do now? He asked, to which Minato spared a shifty glance at Akane. Give me 3 long extendable blades that will kill this Arankar, she commanded. She had already set up the trap, so it was unnecessary for her to be touching her Bankai. All she had to do was say the command. Huh? Naruto said, confused. Are you doing something? Because nothing's happening? Come to think of it, there's pretty much nothing you can even do at this point. My creation can pretty much nullify all of your attacks, so I guess I don't even need to become El Hueco Perfecto in the first place. Now. He stepped forward, forming a spear of Riryoku. Who wants to die first? He asked before he frowned when he heard a whistling noise from an unknown source. What the Naruto roared, as he was beset upon by 3 massive blue blades that extended toward him from 3 different directions. The extension was similar to Ikamaru Jinshurikai, but it was far, far faster, and the blades were much, much larger. Wait, these swords Naruto managed to get out as he recognized Akane's Ryatsu. The heavy swords extended from the 3 mirrors that had been set up for this trap, closing in on the position where they would meet, with Naruto in the middle of it all. Naruto cried out as the first one impacted him, followed by other 2 shortly after. He looked at his 3 family members, mad-eyed and insane, as if he were accusing them of something. They looked on without saying a word, but they seemed to feel a vague sense of accomplishment. Our last shot worked, Akane, Minato said. Fuck you, Naruto growled, putting a claw on one of the blades. The family breathed a sigh of relief, as they saw Naruto was not moving anymore. It's over. It's finally over, Minato said, embracing his wife. He missed Naruto's lips moving. Suerte siete. Chapter 66, Disaster. The remaining members of the Namikaze family stood there, looking sullen as the 3 blades set up from Akane's trap impaled their fallen son and brother. It had to be done, to prevent the destruction of the real world. It's over. It's finally over. We did it, Minato said. They had saved the real world from succumbing to Naruto's power. He should have felt happy in any other circumstance. So, why didn't he? Suerte siete. No. That one thought of Minato's seemed to be shared by the other 2 members of his family, and they shared in his dejected bewilderment as they all heard Naruto's voice ring out. Akane in particular looked the most surprised. She had seen her surefire kill swords impact his body. She fell to her knees, a hopeless look plastered across her face. She no longer had enough strength to fight, and could no longer use her Bankai with the amount of Riryoku she had left. Minato saw how he had survived. The blades had not pierced through Naruto's body at all. Instead, they were pressing harmlessly against the orange Riryoku shield that was wrapped around Naruto's body. The Arrancar himself was unharmed. I guess you could call that a good plan. You timed it perfectly. I had no idea I was being lured here to this spot. Yet, the reason you failed to kill me is that you didn't understand that I can create barriers as well. Naruto wryly placed a claw on the back end of the first massive blade touching his shield, before he released the Suerte Siete. It conglomerated into small orbs, which then shot off like comets at the family, creating a hailstorm of Ryatsu as they cratered the village square. Minato grabbed the stunned Akane, moving them both out of the way of the wretched hailfire. Kushina didn't need help getting out of the way. She was already at a safe distance. It was at that point that Minato realized why Naruto had dropped his shield. The Arrancar was moving the first blade up to his right conductor, and Minato thought back to when Naruto had sucked the Riryoku clean from his own sword. As soon as Naruto touched the blade to his conductor, it went to work, sucking out the massive pool of Riryoku from the long blade. To be imbued with the power to kill something like this, Akane must have put so much Ryatsu into the blade. Now, their trap had proven to be their undoing, because Naruto now had access to that wealth of power. When the conductor finished absorbing the Riryoku, Naruto locked his eyeless gaze upon all of them. Minato felt like a stone had been dropped into his stomach when he heard two loud noises, followed by two brief consecutive flashes of light. Naruto's 8th and 9th tails had been lit with the orange glow on their tips, and were now awakened. The vortex on his stomach was now a pitch black, not rotating at all. El Hueco Perfecto, Naruto whispered. The battlefield was silent. Minato was expecting a grand display of Ryatsu from Naruto, followed by a powerful attack that they would be hard-pressed to avoid. That was how the other tales had progressed, and how the family had fought up to this point. To his surprise, there was nothing. Minato couldn't even feel Naruto's suffocating Ryatsu anymore. It was like it just ceased to exist. Naruto wasn't smiling. Instead, he was casting his eyeless gaze upon all three of them, as if he were a predator deciding which prey he should go after first. Yes. I think I'll start with the biggest nuisance, he said, locking eyes with Akane. Minato raised his sword up, his Cloud Bankai at his side as always. He had no idea what Naruto was going to do, but they needed to be prepared. Destruction. Naruto didn't move. He didn't move one muscle. He was scarcely even breathing anymore. That didn't mean that all was well on the battlefield, however. Somewhere next to Minato, Akane screamed. The man looked down at her in alarm, not understanding what was going on. Her eyes were wide with pain and terror, her mouth open in a scream. Minato's mind went numb when he saw a gaseous red energy flow out from Akane's mouth. It spread out in the air, but it was moving in the direction of Naruto, who remained completely still. No. Wait a minute. Minato thought, his mind working a mile a minute. The red Riryoku was coming from Akane, and from the looks of it, it was being sucked into Naruto's conductors. Naruto was absorbing the Riryoku from Akane's body, without even touching her. Minato's mind tried to figure out a way to stop the process. He knelt down by his daughter's side, racking his brain for any kid that may be able to halt the process. What was he thinking? There was no way to stop this. Daddy, make it stop! Akane screamed. It pained Minato to see her in this much pain, but it was about to get worse. Red Riryoku was beginning to leak from every pore in her body. In addition to that, her eyes exploded into blood as Riryoku began to be drawn out from them as well, much to Minato and Kushina's horror. No! Not my Akane as well! Kushina cried, tears streaming down her face. Minato couldn't blame her. She had almost lost all composure when she learned the news of Taiki's death. Seeing her second child die would no doubt break her. Akane started convulsing when the last of her Riryoku had been drawn out, but that was only the first part of the attack. Her body was withered from the complete lack of Riryoku, and her eyes were bloody holes that were eerily similar to Naruto's own. She raised an arm desperately, apparently trying anything to stop the pain. However, Minato panicked when he witnessed light blue particles fly off from Akane's body, the flesh of her arm disappearing as the particles flowed toward Naruto's conductors. The Primera did not move during the entire ordeal, and he seemed at peace as he absorbed everything from Akane's body. Minato knew what he was doing. He was absorbing her soul. It was her erasure, the very thing that made up her body. The rest of her body structure collapsed, and in her final moments she stared up at her father, her face in a pleading gesture even as half her body withered away into erasure. He knelt down before her, activating the only healing kita he knew, but it was useless. Akane reached out to touch him one last time, before her entire body withered away into the flow of erasure. Naruto climbed to his feet as he absorbed Akane's souls, staring down at the dejected parents. He smiled his signature manic grin at them as he finished, panning his eyes over from the crying Kushina to the sullen Minato, who stared at him back. What did you do?" he croaked weakly. Naruto noted with glee that by killing both of his children, he seemed to take all the life and fight from both Minato and Kushina. "Destruction. My strongest technique, and the technique I learn once I activate all 9 of my tails and awaken El Hueco Perfecto. It is also the basic hollow technique in existence, stealing a soul." Naruto took a few short paces up to them. Absorbing erasure from the environment is an ability that every single hollow possesses, but normally that only applies to the spirit particles from our environment. Any being with a sufficient Ryatsu would easily resist being consumed in that manner. Naruto paused. "Normally, my own abilities allow me to draw a Riryoku from things that make contact with me body or my conductors. However, once I activate El Hueco Perfecto, I can the ability to draw both Riryoku and erasure from any source without even touching the object. This of course includes a physical body," he said, and he seemed to be mulling over the next part of his speech. "It is a one-hit kill move. In this state, if I will it, I can absorb your soul itself no matter the strength of your Ryatsu. Of course, with beings of high Ryatsu such as yourselves, there is a 2-minute cooldown period before I can use destruction again." Minato's stony expression seemed to realize something at that point, and the abomination before them chuckled lowly. "I'm sure you realize. It has been over 2 minutes since I've started talking." Minato looked over, his eyes wide as Naruto halted once again. The feeling of déjà vu fell over him. It was the same prerequisite to when he sucked out Akane's soul. Minato turned to his wife in concern, seeing her kneeled down at the place where Akane had disintegrated not too long ago. She was mumbling to herself, tears falling down from her red hair. Her head snapped up, and she glared at Naruto with barely restrained hatred. "You monster!" she roared, picking up the blue sword Akane gave her and charging. It was the only piece of her daughter that she had left. She would slay Naruto with it herself, no matter the cost. Naruto smiled as she got close. The spiral on his stomach and his whirring conductors fell silent once again. Even the liquid Ryatsu seemed to stop leaking from his orifices for just a moment. It was exactly the same, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Before Kushina could lop Naruto's head off with her sword, she fell to the ground, coughing and sputtering. Minato's heart went into panic mode. This was exactly the same as last time. First his daughter, and now his beloved wife. It was too much to take, even for him. Red Riryoku started gushing out from Kushina's mouth as she screamed. Her sword clattered to the ground uselessly, as the same red Riryoku started gushing out of every pore in her body as if it were sweat, and began to flow into the spikes upon Naruto's shoulders. Once he had completely drained Kushina of all her Riryoku, he moved on to absorbing her erasure. Images of Akane's death flashed through Minato's mind as he rushed to rescue his wife, but her entire body was already beginning to disintegrate into spirit particles. By the time he got there, she was already halfway gone. He picked up what remained of her body, tears streaming down his cheeks. She stared up at him as her body dissolved, smiling lightly at him. "Don't make that face, Minato. You know we have to pass on E eventually. It just looks like I'm gonna move on B before you. Make sure you stop Naruto. For all of our sakes," she whispered. "But Kushina," Minato croaked. "I love you." We've spent more than 3 centuries together. I can't even imagine living my life without you. Minato blubbered, and Kushina placed a dissolving hand on his face. And I love you too. But I want you to live on and be happy. Don't blame yourself. Akane and Taiki may be dead, all of our friends may be dead, and IW will be joining them soon. She trailed off, breathing heavily now. But you will find a new purpose. D defeat Naruto, and pick up the pieces left behind. I know you can do it. You have never failed before. Kushina weakly told her beloved husband. Tears were falling down her withered face at this point, as beautiful blue rays were flying through the air. Minato regarded her with a tearful smile, which Kushina returned as cheerfully as she could. Why yeah, he said softly, as her body drifted away into nothing more than raysure. He couldn't find it in his heart to tell her the truth. He couldn't find it in his heart to tell her that he had just 2 minutes to live. He also knew that he was probably the last Shinigami now. There was nothing to rebuild. Are you finished now? Naruto asked, absorbing the last stream of blue raysure into his conductors. You understand now that you're the last one left, Dad. Everyone else is dead. Minato dried his eyes, climbing to his feet, while he regarded the spot where his dying wife lay just seconds ago. There was already nothing left to remember her by. He slowly reached out, grabbing the blue sword that Kushina had dropped. He caressed the hilt of it softly, lifting it and testing its weight. He pointed it at Naruto. Yeah. 2 minutes. I could just maul you right now and get it over with, but where's the fun in that? I'll take it slow and help you enjoy your final 2 minutes alive, Naruto said, laughing. He held out his hand, creating an orange sword made entirely of Ryoryoku. Let's see if you can even keep up with me holding back this much, he roared, charging Minato. He wants an even fight right before he kills me? What a waste of time. Still, I've got enough pride to go out fighting, so what the hell? Minato held out his blade, blocking the strike from Naruto as the two locked blades. 1 minute and 45 seconds. Minato tried to counter, pushing Naruto off him and kicking the Arrancar in the stomach. He felt pain lash up through his leg. The Arrancar's hierro was super strong in this state. He struck back with as much ferocity as he could, but he was weak. Though if there was the slightest inkling of a chance that he could defeat Naruto, he'd take it. Perhaps the Primera's stupidity would be his downfall. He had to try. He swung with reckless abandon, disregarding all forms of defense to press the attack. He knew that his body didn't matter at this point, not with under 2 minutes to live. 1 minute and 20 seconds. Naruto leaped back, charging up a Siro. Novino Siro. When he released the beam, it soared out for miles on either side, lapping at both of the ruined village's borders as it soared through the air all the way past the ruined gates in the south. Minato was calm though, and all he had to do is hold his sword out and cut straight through it. Akane's final gift was imbued with the power to cut through Naruto's attacks. He could cut a Siro with this special sword. 1 minute, he thought, looking at the display of the whirling vortex and humming shoulder spikes on Naruto's person. The Primera himself seemed to be keeping track of the time. The powerful Siro raced by him harmlessly, and Minato crouched low and switched hands with his sword. Naruto fanned his awakened tails in front of him, thrusting 3 of them down in different places near where Minato stood. Those things were heavier than they looked. Minato charged as much Ryatsu into his sword as he could, holding it aloft as he prepared to stab Naruto. 30 seconds. Naruto sidestepped it easily, using Sonito to get directly behind Minato. He used his own sword to try and sweep him underneath his feet and cut his legs off, but Minato leaped over that easily, holding his sword behind his back to block the next strike. 15 seconds. Now! Minato roared, putting all his Ryatsu and strength into a final 2-handed strike that would cut Naruto down. Naruto himself seemed surprised at the ferocity of the attack. It was even faster than he could react. 10 seconds. I can do this, he thought to himself, and slashed down with his final shot. Naruto seemed shocked, and even allowed some fear to enter his features, before his posture relaxed. Just kidding, he said, laughing all the way. When the sword impacted Naruto's torso, it failed to cut through. All of the Riryoku had been drained from the sword. Minato's mind went numb. Of course it would be like this. He was faking it all the way. If he wanted to, he could have drawn the Riryoku from my sword before the fight even started. I'm an idiot. Minato was promptly kicked in the stomach, where he flew back 10 feet and collapsed into the dirt. He never stood a chance. Naruto's power had been overwhelming from the beginning. That last spat was really nothing more than a symbolic battle. He just wanted to drag this out a little longer. For fun. And now there's no time for me. Well, that was fun. You still couldn't do much, though, and all fun things must come to an end. It's been more than 2 minutes now. I'll treat you to the same death as your wife and daughter, Dad. Minato saw the shadow of Naruto fall over him, the Primera Espada looking down at him and mocking him as he prepared to end his life. At least it will be finally over, Minato thought. It was better this way. There was nothing left for him in this world. The man felt a deep pain rack him to the very core of his body. He opened his mouth to scream, and he saw his bright yellow Riryoku being forced from his system to be added to Naruto's collection. It was strange. Despite the intense pain, the more prominent feeling of his body turning to erasure took over. He didn't know how to describe, but it was a deep, nagging feeling that took over after Naruto had finished taking all his Riryoku. As his body disintegrated, the final thing that Minato was the fierce, unapologetic grin of the creature that Minato had once called son. He turned away in his final moment, before his soul was stolen and everything went black. Thus, Namikaze Minato died. Naruto was sitting upon the ruined Hokage Tower when he realized that there were no humans in sight. This place had been long since abandoned, which meant there was no real purpose for him here anymore. He always knew that he would leave all traces of his connection to Konoha behind one day, and move on. Right now, he could say that there was no one alive to tie him to Konoha anymore. The Primera had remained in his Resurrección, Segunda Etapa even after the battle, though he supposed there was no reason. It felt more natural this way, though he could without a doubt return to his sealed state at any time. Naruto stared at the sky. Although he couldn't see the portal, he could sense its connection to Soul Society and Hueco Mundo all throughout the fight with his family. Now that some time had passed, he could no longer sense that same connection in the sky. It was pretty obvious that both of the other realms had been fully merged into the real world some time ago. Perhaps it had happened during the fight with his family, because Naruto couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when. Soul Society and Hueco Mundo were no more, in more ways than one. There was no way for any Shinigami or Hollow to have survived the reformation of one realm, unless they managed to escape into the portal like he did before their world collapsed. Considering no one knew what was going on, that was unlikely. All three realms had reformed into one, but there would be no remnants of Soul Society or Hueco Mundo in the real world. All of the Shinigami were dead, all of the Hollow in Hueco Mundo were dead, and there was no carryover effect of anything else from either world. Of course, as long as humans existed, so would Hollows. They would no doubt appear again before long. On the other hand, the Shinigami were well and truly wiped out. Naruto jumped down from the balcony of the Hokage Tower, touching down upon the streets of the village. It was time for him to leave this place for good, both physically and in his memories. It was time for him to move on, and see what would happen without any Shinigami. After all, he had the entire real world to explore,